Okay, my name is Tim Burns. I'm the Tim Burns, or third degree burns.
Hit it, hit it, hit it.
Call me Blondie, like the song.
Tim Burns has not always been a household name, but his work has become legendary in the Australian underground art scene. Over the last 30 years, working both at home and overseas, Tim has developed a portfolio which has dabbled in the realms of paint, print, sculpture, film, video, performance, theatre and interactivity, although he is best recognised as a conceptual artist.
Yeah, well, he's an artist who sort of grew up in Western Australia, moved to Sydney, went to New York for 20 years, came back to Australia, always wanted to come back to the wheat belt.
Tim's always been a very energetic person. He's always been a little bit out of the norm of most people's boundaries.
He's a very interesting man, one of the most interesting people I've met.
In my experience working with Tim, anything good or bad can happen.
He doesn't think perhaps in a straight line. So, you know, he was always a very exciting person to be around.
Tim was born in Cunderdin Hospital on the 29th of August 1947, and he was the fourth of 6 children.
It was an adventure growing up with Tim as an older brother, because I always looked up to him. But we came from a farming background, so fairly conservative background in lots of ways. It was a rather dynamic household, which I think contributed probably a lot to Tim's creativity in an interesting way. My mother was, even though she came from a conservative background, she was a wonderful, liberal, generous person. Very, very accepting, especially of Tim, who always was pushing the boundaries by most people's gauge. And Tim was a very vital person to have in our household. He went to Guildford Grammar School, so that was his high school years. He was very involved in art at Guildford. Bob Juniper was his art master or art teacher at that time. He was a very big influence on Tim. And they have maintained a friendship up till today.
He saved my life really, because I hated school with a passion, and when I arrived at Bob in the art department, just everything opened up for me. It was fantastic.
Graduating into James Street Tech, Tim soon became involved in a number of new artistic projects.
I sort of got interested in casting and mucking around with plaster and casting people, and I did a whole series of casts, and I got more and more interested in how the audience reacted to works and stuff. So I started to get more and more into the kinetics of sort of art and into things that move.
The great critic Frederick Jameson wrote recently that in the future, if you were going to have a successful art, it would have to be based on a small degree of violence. He does do that. One of his great heroes, if you like, or certainly someone who's modelled himself on, is the French surrealist filmmaker, poet and writer Antonin Artaud. Artaud invented an idea, or is famous for deploying an idea called the theatre of cruelty. And the cruelty is for the audience, of course.
when I went to Sydney, I worked for Brett Whiteley, a painter, Australian painter, Sydney. We hung out together. He said, if you come over to Sydney, I'll give you a job. He set me up with a motorbike and a job when I got there, which was great. He took me to the Yellow House and I kind of moved in there. And the Yellow House was a place that was put together by Martin Sharp primarily, a number of other people, obviously a large number of other people, but Martin kind of had this whole thing where they took over a building and everyone moved in and it became an environmental room place. The first thing that I did there was I used a sculpture or a cast of my sister in the bathroom, and when you opened the door the shower turned on, and she was just looked like she was just getting into the shower. And because the place, people lived in it as well, I just set up the idea that kind of people would open the door and they go, oh, excuse me, and they would close the door because they thought someone was getting into the shower. So it was just that little moment, and it was just that kinetic movement, and the shower going and the bathroom set up as a bathroom, and it was the bathroom anyway.
I was part of that, that process for some of his works as being a model. So that was something that stays with me because I guess that was an interactive role for me.
So I was always looking at the sort of context, or more and more at the context and the audience's reaction.
Tim's popularity skyrocketed after his work A Change of Plans in 1973, which caused uproar in the art world. Featured in the Art Gallery of New South Wales for the opening of the Opera House, the piece was so controversial it saw the lead actor arrested for his involvement in the project. The interactive piece broadcast two nude actors via closed-circuit recording to a TV set in the exhibition hall. The work by Burns made press headlines and also saw Tim being named a performer terrorist and the original Big Brother. It was the overwhelming response to this work that influenced Tim's decision to move to New York, where he stayed for the next 20 years. It was in the Big Apple that the Mildura postcard project took off and led Tim to create his avant-garde film, Carnage.
Mystery surrounding the flood of postcards into Mildura from New York is gradually unfolding. Further clues have indicated that the whole thing was an art project undertaken by Tim Burns. Burns has made an all-out, one-man effort to drum home to Mildura people that he believed crosswalks were needed on city streets.
I had the distinct impression my life was in danger each time I crossed the street.
Then there was something about a can of paint, or...
It was I bought a can of white paint and a brush with the intention of painting crosswalks in the early morning, but found the road traffic too heavy.
What did you do then?
I had a frustrated but burning desire to see crosswalks there, and I've been carrying out my campaign wherever I might be in the world.
You left Mildura?
I left Mildura.
And Carnage we shot a little bit each week and then we added it on. And it was really about me travelling around New York. You know, I start by running, then I'm riding a bike, then I'm on the subway, then, you know, I get run over on the bike, I get knocked off the subway.
Of the $37 million spent on moving people and goods in New York City, only 6% of that is spent on mass transit system. And it benefits only 3% of the people moving in New York every day.
Why don't you just get off the subway, all you and your kind? Who do you think you are?
And then I end up going to Detroit and I get arrested for filming in the Ford Rouge plant. And then I come back to New York and, you know, it keeps playing out from there, you know.
Why cars? Why cars? Why cars? Why cars? Why cars? Why cars? Why cars?
Why cars?
Why cars?
Why cars?
Why cars?
Why cars?
Why cars?
Why cars?
Why cars?
Why cars?
Why cars?
Why cars?
Why cars?
Why
Why cars?
Why cars?
Why cars?
Why cars? Why cars?
Why cars?
Why cars?
Why cars?
Right. What's it say?
Carnage. Carnage? What is that supposed to mean?
But if there were no cars, the buses would probably be great, because they'd put think of all the factories out there making buses.
Yeah, but how will we get around? What will we do for transportation?
The bus service would be great.
Will China ever turn to private car ownership?
Probably not. The Chinese are well aware of the undesirable effects of dependence on private cars in many Western countries. Congestion, air pollution, depletion of oil resources, and the high cost of individual upkeep.
Because Carnage was really about performance related to film, so it was me interacting with the showing of the film, and that never been done before, really. It got the CAPS Award in New York in '78, so, and that was like, you know, I got $5,000 or something for that. I can't remember what it was, but gave me an ability to kind of survive. It was always just working against, you know, kind of money, really. And that partly, you know, I ended up running out of money and ways of making it successfully in New York. Then I started working more as a PA on music videos and things like that, because I couldn't get any money. Shot karaoke, shot 100 karaokes or so, maybe not 100, but it's between 60 and 80, I think. You get mapped and, you know, there's no top in New York and there's no bottom, and I was at the top and I went to the bottom, I think, you know. But also wanted to talk about Australia problems. Like America wasn't my problem.
Deciding to return home to Australia, Tim continued working on both his film and fine art projects. One of these was the Kangaroo Collection, which involved working with the carcasses of kangaroos through different mediums such as sketch, paint, photography and sculpture. Tim created casts from the bodies of roadkill, which featured at Sculptures by the Sea. Following this, he made his award-winning film Luke's Party.
Anyway, yeah, so I came back and I had a workshop with all these people in it, so I had to try and decide what I wanted to make. I wanted to actually make a movie while, talking about how to make a movie.
Oh, look, I'm all right. I'm all right. How are you? Well, I was going to come around, but I couldn't organise any babysitters, and I'm trying to make this film, and nothing's working for me.
Anyway, in that was about the Stolen Generation. It's about her trying to tell a story, and she doesn't get the story out because all the neighbours, everybody's interrupting her all the time. The chaos of her life takes over.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Luke. Why don't you all go away? Why don't you just go away?
And that went off. I won the Melbourne Short Film Australian Best Short. I won the San Francisco Golden Gate, Cahiers du Cinema, the Cinema de Reel in Paris. Just went around the world and did really big business for us.
But for all the awards, Tim's work has remained largely unrecognised by the general Australian public. In 1981, he created the film Thus Went Philippa, which followed a day in the life of a New York drug dealer. Responses to the piece saw Burns wrongly labelled a junkie, and for 6 years he struggled to get work. Numerous run-ins with the law, local councils, various art bodies and the narrow-mindedness of the West Australian art scene meant Tim's brilliance was not always acknowledged.
I know, I wanted to be, popular. Most people would, I'm sure, It's only underground because nobody likes it. The general public never really got to it in a way, or hadn't kind of gone out into the, I'm not in the Sydney Opera House or anything, even though I opened the bloody Opera House. God.
Tim has always avoided being a success. He's brilliant at avoiding being a success. And that's because the mean-mindedness of Perth is such that he's never going to get the support he needs. I think he would have been a very, very different artist had there been a more visionary and more generous art scene here. I think he would have been able to contribute a great deal more, but he's always kind of knocking his head against this, and of course that's partly because he is West Australian.
I saw this in that article the other day. I thought, underground, shit, that's the kiss of death, mate. It's all over for me. He said, it was Lucas Hyde, that I was a legend in the underground. So, you know, and I thought, oh, well, maybe that's better than nothing. But, you know, it's pretty tacky, really. I mean, I didn't want to be in the underground, no. I just ended up that way.
You mean, what separates him from pathetic imitators of international art? He's not one. It's very simple. He doesn't do that. I mean, Australian art as a whole is extremely fraudulent, as I'm sure you must know. You know, that Perth in particular has suffered from this rash of people who would like to pretend to be postmodern in Perth. You're kidding.
You know, I don't have $1 million on me right now, which I wish I did. You know, I've sort of pared back now, you know, to virtually nothing, but because it is pretty hard, you know, I mean, make a living in the bush when you're a media kind of worker or whatever. Again, I can't really get a job here, you know, no one would really employ me in the art world. I could only get employed in the film world, really, you know, so that was the drag. I'd rather be in the art world, you know, really.
While Tim's art did not always receive recognition during its time, over the last few years there has been a resurgence of interest in his work. He is now currently involved in his latest project, Diatribe.
It's about the battle between security and sustainability, I would think. We're a security company that's looking at the sky on hard times at the moment. We're left with a caravan and, you know, and a shed. So things are not perfect. On the other hand, we think that sustainability is going to be, you know, where it's all happening in the future.
It's a live, interactive television show that'll be broadcast via, you know, the internet. So it'll involve live streaming, and the narrative will be generated by putting all the characters involved in the drama together and improvising. So that'll also involve the input from the audience.
Diatribe is about engaging the community in a discussion to do with sustainability. So yeah, the idea is to get it out there, some information, some high quality information, and you know, and in an interesting format.
So we're starting off with some general ideas, some general themes, throwing them in together, bringing the audience into the mix, and then letting it play itself out. So anything can happen.
The whole sustainable thing is actually got a very strong contemporary theme, and I'm sure the way Tim will approach it will probably shake it up and get it out there in a different way.
His innovative, avant-garde and often outrageous artistic style is being revisited, particularly in art schools and technical colleges, as a significant contributor to the history of Australian art.
What did they say on the, what was it Groucho said? You know, if they let me be a member of the club,
Don't want to join.
I wouldn't want to join.
At 64 years old, Tim BURNS has not given up his passion for conceptual art and continues to push the boundaries.
What would you say to, you know, budding artists and filmmakers today?
Hello? Shoot it, do it, whatever it is, just do it. Yeah, no, it's been amazing. Can't complain. I'm still alive too, which amazes me. What's on Spike Milligan's grave? I told you I was sick! Yeah.